pushed around a light-as-air vacuum with one hand. Sometimes the vacuums didn't even have cords. This vacuum was nothing like that. It was more like a spaceship, a hunk of metal so huge it could probably launch a person to the moon. As I moved forward and back around the lumpy couch and the worn recliner no one but Larry was allowed to sit in, I smelled the chocolate cake baking in the oven. Larry would be home from work soon. He claimed he didn't eat sweets on account of his training to get back in the ring. Apparently, the empty Ho-Ho's packages I saw in the trash every morning didn't count. But it was his birthday, so Mom had splurged on groceries and made him an all-natural cake out of carob and honey. I didn't know why you'd eat chocolate cake of any kind if you cared about being healthy, but whatever. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when she brought it out, and I really couldn't wait to have a piece. Even though this wasn't one of the fancy store-bought cakes that I'd always longed to try, you couldn't really go wrong when it came to chocolate cake. With a little luck, Larry would be in a good mood. "You're the ref in my ring," he'd say to Mom, breaking into a real grin, and not the kind he gave when he thought someone was an idiot and he was about to make sure they knew it. Then he'd say a bunch of other goofy things like, "You're the tape on my knuckles, and you're the gloves on my fists." And Mom would giggle and raise her hand up to cover the snaggled front tooth she'd never had the money to fix. And then they'd kiss, which would be gross, but he'd be happy and tell us stories from when he was the middleweight boxing champion of Wyoming and Nebraska. I loved his stories, even though I was never quite sure if they were true. I searched online once. I couldn't find a single article about him biting someone's ear off in the ring, although there was an article about another boxer who did that. He'd sit for hours, drinking his Bud Light and spinning yarns about all the men he'd whooped. Sometimes, Mom let me stay up late and listen. Other times, usually when he got to a story about how he kicked someone's can outside the ring, she told me it was time to shower, even if I'd showered the night before. She was just trying to get rid of me because she didn't think fighting was the answer to all the world's problems. But she didn't dare say that in front of Larry, or she'd end up in a fight herself. After we finished cleaning the trailer, Mom took a shower and changed into a pretty summer dress with butterflies. The dress used to be dark purple, but it had been washed so many times that it was now more of a soft lilac. There were some loose threads hanging off the hem. I didn't say anything because her white face was paler than anyone should ever be at the end of summer. But she'd brushed her hair until it shone. She'd even put on lip gloss, trying to look her best. I didn't care about looking my best, which was a good thing because instead of Mom's straight blonde hair, I had a mess of dark, wispy waves that had a mind of their own. And where Mom's eyes were dark brown with a golden ring that glowed like honey in the sunlight, mine were plain brown and more like something you might find at the bottom of the toilet, if you know what I mean. The one thing I had going for me was my golden brown skin, which made me look tan even in the middle of winter. Mom said that I got that from my dad, who was from Spain and had come to the U.S. to visit relatives when they met. I wanted to know more about him, but Mom said that was all she knew. She also said that anyone could be a donor, but being a father had to be earned, and mine had given up that chance when he disappeared after finding out she was pregnant. Mom took a break from making dinner to inspect my outfit. I tugged at my t-shirt. She always bought my clothes a couple sizes too big so I'd have plenty of room to grow, but this one had become tight around the chest over the summer. Since she hadn't been to the laundromat lately, it was the only clean shirt I could find. She smiled and pulled me in for a hug. I let myself relax into her arms. She'd always towered over me, but a recent growth spurt meant I'd finally caught up. Even though we were both tall, Mom was little more than skin and bones, while I'd developed curves I wished would disappear. I breathed in her peppermint scent. I couldn't remember the last time she'd hugged me this way, just her and me. "Thanks for your help today," she said. Something in my chest melted. I wanted to stay wrapped up in her arms forever. But the roar of Larry's truck and the crunch of wheels in the driveway announced his arrival. Mom broke away. The softness under my ribs turned sharp and prickly. Mom and I used to be two halves that made a perfect whole. Now it was like Larry was the whole, and the two of us weren't worth measuring. Sometimes I thought about running away. But life before Larry was spent moving from one lousy apartment to another, camping out in our car when we couldn't come up with enough cash for a deposit and first month's rent, not knowing how long we might have to make a single can of ravioli last. I had $20 I'd found in an empty dryer at the laundromat, but that wouldn't get me far. If Mom couldn't make it with her waitressing job, what hope did I have on my own? So when Larry stomped up the stairs and pulled open the door, I put on my best smile and yelled, "Happy birthday!" He stepped back like he was surprised and looked around, pretending to be confused. "Birthday?" he said. "Does someone around here have a birthday?"